My phone rang at 6:42 in the morning, in a room that smelled like hand sanitizer and burnt coffee, on the 6th floor of Mercy Ridge Medical outside Charlotte. It was my daughter, Brielle, and her voice was doing something I will never be able to unhear. It was trembling, not with grief, with anticipation. Grief shakes low, greed shakes high. After 39 years of being her father, I could finally tell the difference. "Dad," she said, "Grandpa passed last night. A massive stroke. They couldn't do anything." A pause, exactly long enough to sound respectful. "There's a will. From 2012. The house, the land, the accounts, everything comes to me. Grandpa's money is mine now. I'm so sorry, Dad, but you get nothing." Before I could answer, the phone changed hands, and my son-in-law came on. Dexter, warm and quick, like oil sliding across a griddle. "Calvin, buddy, let's not drag this out. You've been living in the old man's house rent-free for 2 years. We'll need you packed out in 72 hours. And we're going with cremation, the simple package. No sense putting good money in the ground, right?" I didn't argue. I didn't say one word. I reached over and set the phone down on the rolling bedside tray. Speaker on. And then I looked to my left, 3 feet to my left, at the hospital bed where my father, Amos Reed, 91 years old, a man who built his first house with his own hands the year the banks refused to lend him a nail, was sitting up in a paper gown with an "4" in his arm, working through a cafeteria toast packet like it owed him money. He looked at the phone. He looked at me. He took a slow sip of black coffee and said, in that gravel whisper of his, "Ask the boy what kind of flowers he's sending. I want them outside my door by lunch. I'm still billing oxygen." At 6:42 in the morning, my daughter declared her grandfather dead and claimed his money, while he sat beside me, alive, chewing toast, listening to himself get divided up like estate furniture. And in roughly 9 hours, she was going to walk onto this floor to collect her inheritance. She had no idea the inheritance was going to walk in through the door to meet her, on his own 2 feet, in Grippy socks. Before I tell you how a stroke that never happened turned into the coldest hospital hallway reveal this family has ever seen, if anyone in your family has ever priced a parent while the monitors were still beeping, hit the like button and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. And answer me this before you know how it ends. Are you a walked-in person or a lawyer person? Would you have let him walk through that door and end it face to face, or stayed quiet and let the paperwork do it? One word in the comments. You'll understand the question by minute 18. My name is Calvin Reed. I'm 68 years old, and for 40 years the state of North Carolina paid me to crawl underneath bridges and find the cracks nobody wanted to see. Bridge inspector. It's not a glamorous job. Nobody makes a television show about it. You spend your career in a harness, upside down over rivers, running your thumb along concrete, listening to steel. But here's the one thing 4 decades under bridges teaches you, and I want you to hold on to it for the next 50 minutes because this entire story runs on it. Nothing collapses suddenly. It only looks sudden. Every failure starts as a hairline crack, thin as a pencil stroke, years before the fall. The bridge doesn't lie to you. People just don't look. I had been not looking at the crack in my own family for about 15 years. Let me introduce you to the load-bearing structure first. My father, Amos Reed, 91. He came up in an era when men measured themselves in board feet and poured foundations on weekends. When the banks wouldn't lend a black tradesman enough to matter, he built his first house anyway, bought lumber 1 paycheck at a time, drove every nail himself, and carried a brass measuring tape on his hip for 60 years the way other men carry a wallet. He built 9 more houses after that one. He owned 4 of them free and clear, plus the accounts, plus a stretch of land east of Charlotte that developers had been circling like gulls for a decade. Sharp? Let me tell you exactly how sharp. 3 weeks before all this, he corrected his own property tax assessment, found a $400 error in the county's favor from memory. The man was a chalk line. Age had slowed his knees and thinned his voice. It had not touched the level in his head. And then there was the crack. My daughter, Brielle, 39 now, Brielle Reed Holt, ever since she married Dexter Holt, 41, a man who has introduced himself as running a fund for 11 years without the fund ever being visible to the naked eye. Brielle did 2 years of law school and kept the vocabulary. She knows how to say probate and fiduciary at a dinner table. What she actually does is manage their image. The leased German cars, the club membership they can't afford, the Christmas cards printed on cardstock thick enough to shingle a roof. I want to be fair to her, because I'm her father, and fair is all I have left to give her. Brielle wasn't born cruel. She was born impatient. And impatience, married to appetite, in a house where the bills whisper louder than the vows. That's not a hairline crack anymore. That's rebar showing through. For the last 19 months, since my wife passed, I've been living in Dad's house. The first one, the one he built by hand. I drove him to appointments. I sorted the pills into the Sunday through Saturday box. I learned what a 91-year-old eats for breakfast, which is exactly what he ate at 51, only slower. And during those same 19 months, Dexter had been helping with the paperwork. That's what he called it. He'd show up smelling like a department store, gather the mail into neat stacks, and volunteer for anything involving account numbers. I noticed. I want that on the record. I noticed, and I said nothing because saying something felt like accusing family. Under a bridge, I never once apologized to the concrete before riding up the crack. But at a kitchen table? At a kitchen table we all go blind. Then, 2 nights ago, Dad's chest went tight during the 10 o'clock news. Tightness, shortness of breath. At 91, you don't gamble. Ambulance to Mercy Ridge. And here's the part the villains of this story will need you to forget. By dawn, he was stable. It wasn't a stroke. It wasn't even a heart attack. It was an arrhythmia and a medication conflict, corrected overnight, monitored on floor 6, neuro step-down out of caution. By the next morning, he was demanding real coffee and insulting the pudding. I slept in the recliner beside his bed, which is how I came to be 3 feet away from him, at 6:42 the following morning, when my phone rang, and my daughter's trembling, hungry voice rewrote reality. They say the phone call changed everything. That's wrong. The phone call didn't change anything. The phone call revealed everything. The crack had been there for years. I just finally had it in writing. Well, in audio. We'll get to that. Now, you're asking the obvious question. How does a living man get declared dead by his own granddaughter at 6:42 in the morning? Answer: he doesn't. Not by accident. So let me walk you through the anatomy of the lie, the way I'd walk a junior inspector through a failure report, slowly, in order, because every bolt matters. Start with the night of the admission. When the paramedics loaded Dad into the ambulance, I rode with him. In the chaos. And there is always chaos. Dexter and Brielle met us at intake, performing concern for the front desk. And while I was back with Dad and the cardiology team, Dexter did something small, quiet, and very deliberate at the registration counter. He told them I was hard to reach, elderly himself, honestly a little overwhelmed, bless him, and listed himself as the family's primary contact for updates. Understand, I have exactly one phone and I answer it. There was nothing hard to reach about me. What Dexter installed at that desk was a filter. From that moment, whatever the hospital said would reach the family through him first. In my trade we call that a single point of failure. He built one on purpose on night 1. Second bolt. Around 4 in the morning, the night of the stroke, there was a genuine commotion on floor 6. A patient 4 doors down coded. Full crash cart, overhead page, the works. That patient, rest his soul, did not make it. Dexter, who had insisted on staying in the family lounge that night, playing devoted son-in-law where the nurses could see him, heard an overhead page, saw a gurney, saw a chaplain walk past at 4:40 a.m., and made a decision. I genuinely don't know, and the investigators later couldn't pin down whether Dexter misheard something that night or simply decided the moment had arrived. And, you know what? It stopped mattering to me. Here's why. When the floor charge nurse made her morning calls, the news that reached her listed contact was that Mr. Reed was stable and resting. We know that because hospital phone logs exist, and a 6:04 a.m. call to Dexter's cell lasted 91 seconds. 91 seconds of stable and resting. And at 6:42, 38 minutes later, my daughter called me, voice trembling with excitement, and told me her grandfather was dead. 38 minutes. That's the gap where this family died, friends. Not on a porch, not in a courtroom. In a 38-minute window where two people heard stable and chose to say gone, because gone was worth more. Why would they do something that unravels the moment anyone walks into room 612? I asked myself that all morning, and the answer is the saddest sentence in this whole story. They didn't think they'd need the lie to hold for long. They thought I'd collapse. They thought a 68-year-old widower, told at dawn that his father was dead and his home was gone, would fold, sign whatever grief put in front of him, agree to a fast cremation, hand over keys, get on a bus. The lie only needed to survive 72 hours. Just long enough for a body release, a budget cremation, a simple package, his words, and a locked house. They weren't afraid of losing him. That's the pill I need you to swallow with me. For 19 months, I watched them not visit, not call, not carry one pill box or one appointment. They weren't afraid of losing him. They were afraid of waiting for him. A 91-year-old man with paid-off houses is, to a certain kind of family, not a person. He's an escrow that eats. Now, the toast. Let me pay off the cold open properly because you've been patient. At 6:15 that morning before the call, a physical therapist named Marisol had taken Dad on his first hallway walk. Hospital policy, keep the elderly moving. 10 minutes for pole rolling alongside, grippy socks on the linoleum. He came back into room 612 pleased with himself, sat up on the bed, and demanded toast. The cafeteria cart obliged. That is why, at 6:42, when my phone rang, my father was upright, fed, caffeinated, and in the best mood I'd seen him in a month. I answered on speaker out of 40 years of habit. Under a bridge, you keep your hands free. And so we both heard it. All of it. Grandpa's money is mine now. 72 hours. The simple package. No sense putting good money in the ground. I watched my father listen to his own estate sale. His face didn't move. Only his thumb did. It went to the brass measuring tape he keeps clipped to everything, even a hospital gown, and rubbed it once the way other men touch a cross. When the call ended, room 612 was very quiet. A monitor beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a breakfast cart rattled. My father looked at the dead phone for a long moment, and then he said the thing that told me exactly how the next 3 days were going to go. Calvin, he said, when your crew found a crack in a bridge deck, did you shout at the crack? No, sir. We documented it. He picked the second piece of toast up off the tray. Then get a pen. And when the children come to collect me this afternoon, he took a bite, chewed it slow, swallowed. I believe I'll answer the door myself. So we got a pen. And I did one more thing. I opened the voice memo app on my phone, and from that hour on, it ran through every conversation this family had. You'll hear why that mattered. Every word of what comes next has a timestamp on it. They needed him to be a dead man by paperwork. What they got instead was a live one, with a walking route, a witness, and a working microphone. They arrived at 3:12 in the afternoon. I know the exact minute, because the visitor badge system at Mercy Ridge prints a timestamp on every sticker, and those stickers are about to become the most expensive pieces of paper in this family's history. Hold that thought. It's a load-bearing thought. I heard them before I saw them. You could hear Brielle's heels on hospital linoleum from the elevator bank. A confident, unhurried click, the walk of a woman arriving to sign for a package. And underneath it, Dexter's cologne moved down that corridor like weather. Floor 6 smells like sanitizer and instant coffee and tired people doing their best. Those two came through it smelling like a mall. They were not crying. I want to be precise, because precision is my whole personality. My daughter walked onto the floor where she believed her grandfather had died that morning, and she was walking like the closing agent at a real estate deal. They went straight to room 612. I was in the family alcove across the hall with a cup of vending machine coffee, exactly where I'd planned to be, phone in my breast pocket, microphone up. They didn't see me. People like Dexter never scan a room for quiet men in flannel. It's a design flaw. The door to 612 was open. The bed was empty. Stripped mattress, folded blanket at the foot. And I watched my daughter look at that empty bed and exhale relief, friends. I was 12 feet away. I know what relief looks like on that face. I've seen it at report cards and pregnancy scares. She turned to Dexter and said, and this is verbatim, timestamp 3:14 p.m. because the memo was running. Okay, they've already moved him. That's good. That means the release paperwork started. If we push the cremation for Thursday, probate can open Monday. I want it moving before Dad finds his spine. He'll cave once the house is listed anyway. He always caves. 39 years of me loving that girl, folded into 3 words to her husband next to her grandfather's empty bed. Dexter, for his part, was already at the nurse's station with the manila folder, doing his greasy warm voice at the charge nurse. Hi, yes, Holt, family of Amos Reed? We'll need the discharge documentation. Well, the release documentation, a small laugh, a practiced grief-adjacent shrug, today if possible. And whatever his personal effects, actually, is there a valuables inventory? He wore rings. He asked about the rings' friends. Before he asked where the body was, he asked about the rings. The charge nurse, Nurse Adora, floor 6, 20 years on that unit, a woman with the exact facial expression of a person who has seen every species of family, looked at the folder, looked at Dexter, and said the first of the 2 greatest sentences I heard that day. Sir, released to where? Mr. Reed is at physical therapy. And right on that beat. I could not have staged it better with a film crew, and I promise you I didn't stage it. Hospital PT schedules run on their own gravity. The double doors at the end of the hallway swung open. And my father walked in, slow, upright, 91 years old, in a paper gown and grippy socks. One hand on the 4-pole rolling beside him like a staff sergeant walking the line, the brass measuring tape a visible rectangular bulge in the gown's chest pocket, because that man will be buried with it, decades from now, at a time of his own choosing. Marisol, the therapist, walked half a step behind him, and later she told me she couldn't figure out why her patient had insisted on saving his afternoon walk until, quote, my grandchildren arrive. The hallway did that thing hallways do in hospitals. It went quiet in a wave, starting from the doors. Brielle was still mid-sentence. I want history to record the exact sentence she was inside of when she saw him. And honestly, the 2012 will is so clean we won't even need. She stopped there. Forever. That sentence has no ending and never will. My father shuffled to a stop about 8 feet from them. He looked at his granddaughter, dressed in black, by the way. She'd worn black, the performance was fully catered. And then at Dexter, gray as the linoleum, folder hanging from his hand like a dead fish. And Amos Reed, who once waited out a bank, 3 droughts, and a county zoning board, delivered his line at the volume of a man ordering coffee. Don't stop on my account. I like knowing my auction price while I'm still upright. Nobody moved. An orderly pushing a linen cart just parked it and stood there, openly watching, the way you'd stop for a meteor. Dexter recovered first. Men like Dexter always reboot into sales mode. Amos. Oh, thank God. We heard. There was a call. The hospital called us. They told us. And Nurse Adora, who was already pulling up the chart, delivered the second greatest sentence of the day in the flattest clinical voice ever issued by the state of North Carolina. Sir, this patient is alert and oriented times 4. Who told you he expired? Silence. The kind with weight on it. Dexter's mouth opened and closed twice. I watched a man try 3 lies at once and jam like a printer feeding 3 sheets. And that's when I stood up from the alcove, walked across the hall with my vending machine coffee, stood beside my father, and answered her question for the record, flat, no heat, the way you read a finding into a report. You did. At 6:42 this morning. I have the call. Brielle's eyes came to me, then down to the phone in my breast pocket, and I watched the arithmetic land. Speakerphone, bedside tray, 3 feet away, all morning. Her face did something complicated. The performance tears, which had switched on when Amos appeared, switched off. Just off. Like a porch light on a schedule. My father patted the brass tape in his gown pocket, took the handles of the 4-pole like a man boarding his own vessel, and walked past both of them toward room 612. At the door he paused, didn't turn all the way, just gave them the profile and said, You'll want to keep those visitor badges. Children, first time you've worn one in 19 months? A beat. Timestamps and everything. Then he went in and asked Marisol if it was too late to get toast. That was minute, one of the rest of this family's life. They came to collect an estate. The estate came back from physical therapy and collected them. And here's the thing I need you to understand before the next act. Everything you just heard, the probate sentence, the rings, the release paperwork, he always caves, was now sitting in my phone, time-stamped, next to a 6:42 a.m. recording of my daughter saying, "Grandpa's money is mine now." We were done being a family with a secret. We were now a file with exhibits. Now, if you think being caught declaring a living man dead would end the operation, you have never dealt with people like Dexter Holt. Getting caught doesn't stop a salesman. It just changes the product. Within the hour, the story was already being rewritten in front of us. We were all in room 612 now. Dad propped up in bed with his coffee, me in the recliner, the two of them arranged at the foot of the bed like they were posing for a brochure about concern. Dexter went first. New angle, same grease. Look, obviously we're all just so relieved. Obviously. There was a mix-up, some nurse on the phone this morning. Honestly, we should sue, but Calvin. He turned to me, palms open, half a laugh. Buddy, a 6:42 call? Are we sure? You've been sleeping in a recliner for 2 nights. Hospitals are stressful. At our age, things get swimmy. Nobody would blame you for misremembering who said what. There it was. Watch the mechanism, friends. 72 hours ago, I was hard to reach and overwhelmed, bless him, at the intake desk, and now I was swimmy. They had one product on the shelf. The old men can't be trusted with reality, and they were going to keep selling it in every size. I didn't argue. I sipped my coffee. Documentation doesn't argue. Then it was Brielle's turn, and my daughter did something I genuinely was not ready for, and I inspect disasters professionally. She pulled the visitor chair close to the bed, close to her grandfather, first time in 19 months, put her hand on the blanket over his shin, and pivoted the entire morning into an act of love. Grandpa, thank God. But today was a warning. You understand that, right? Next time it will be real. You can't be in that big house anymore. There's a place off Providence Road. Memory care, but the nice, kind chef gardens. And Dad, she looked at me, voice soft as a hymn. You can't keep doing this alone. You'll kill yourself. Let us handle the liquid assets, the properties. We'll set up something structured so nobody has to worry about money ever again. Memory care. For the man who 3 weeks earlier had corrected the county's math from a kitchen chair. Say what you want about my daughter. The woman does not waste a crisis. She had walked in to bury him, hit an iceberg, and inside of 90 minutes she was repackaging the funeral as a wellness plan. And we'll handle the liquid assets. Write that phrase down somewhere, because in the next chapter you're going to find out that the assets had already been handled. For 19 months. Quietly. Through a maintenance company. And my father heard all of it with the stillness of poured concrete. And when she finished, he set his coffee down on the rolling tray, looked at her with something that was almost tenderness, and said, "Measure the room if you want, sweetheart. Bring the laser and the clipboard. The foundation still reads square." He tapped his temple once. "Now, tell me about this 2012 will of mine. I'm curious what I signed, because my attorney and I burned every will older than 2019 in a barrel behind the house, and I remember the smoke." Room 612 got very cold very politely. Dexter said something about the folder being drafts, mostly, and needing to loop in their guy. Visiting hours, mercifully for them, ended at 7. But on the way out, and this is the moment I want you to keep, because this is Brielle's own move. Nobody scripted it for her. My daughter stopped at the nurse's station, leaned in confidentially to Nurse Adora, and said, in the caring voice, the good granddaughter voice, "You should flag his chart. He has episodes. Confusion, paranoia. He'll deny it, they always do. His care team should know before anyone lets him sign anything." She did that on her own, unprompted. Her husband was already at the elevator. That one didn't come from Dexter's playbook. That came from somewhere inside my little girl, and I heard it land in my phone's microphone from 9 feet away, and I am not going to pretend to you that it didn't take something out of me that has not grown back. If you've made it this far, here's the halfway question, and I want the honest version. Has anyone in your family ever counted a living parent as inventory? One phrase in the comments, never again, or almost did. And if this is the first channel where you've heard your own story told back to you, the subscribe button is how you keep a seat at this table. It gets colder from here. That night, after the floor quieted down, The rolling bedside tray stopped being a toast delivery surface and became a ward desk. Picture it. One hospital room, lights low, monitors doing their slow green arithmetic. Me in the recliner with a legal pad. My 91-year-old father sitting up in bed in reading glasses, sharp as a chalk line, directing the operation like a foreman who never actually retired. Item by item, we laid the family out on that tray and inspected it the way you inspect a bridge everyone swears is fine. Exhibit 1. I went down to the patient advocacy office before it closed and requested a copy of Dad's registration file. There it was in laser print. Primary contact. Dexter Holt. Relationship. Grandson-in-law. Established the night of admission at the intake desk while I rode up in the elevator with the cardiac team. The filter in writing. The advocacy office also confirmed what the filter had been worth. The 6:04 a.m. status call, stable and resting, had gone to exactly one phone number in America, and it was Dexter's. Exhibit 2. The real paperwork. In 2019, after a small health scare, Dad had quietly updated everything with an elder law attorney in Charlotte named Rhea Colton, a woman with a handshake like a torque wrench. Healthcare power of attorney, me. Financial power of attorney, me. The current will and a revocable trust. Filed, witnessed, notarized, sitting in Rhea's fireproof cabinet. Which meant the manila folder Dexter had been carrying around all day. The 2012 will wasn't just stale. It was revoked paper. Waving it at a hospital was theater. Filing it, though filing it would be a crime. Remember that. It matters in about 15 minutes. Exhibit 3, and this is where the numbers started to speak, and I have never heard numbers say uglier things. Dad keeps a builder's notebook. 60 years of habit. Every expense, every payment, block capitals, one line each. For the last year and a half, though, the entries thin out because Dexter was helping with the paperwork. So from my recliner, on my phone, I pulled the online statements for the account that pays for upkeep on the 4 houses. And there it was, marching down the screen with the regularity of a heartbeat. Ridgeline Property Care, LLC. $2,900. $3,100. $2,850. 19 months of it. Repairs no tenant ever saw. Gutter work on a house with new gutters. A roof patched 3 times on paper that I had personally walked that spring. Total, $61,000 for $100. It took me 11 minutes on the Secretary of State's website to find what you've already guessed. Ridgeline Property Care, LLC, formed 19 months ago. Registered agent, Dexter Holt. The fund finally existed, friends. We were the fund. My father, the escrow that eats, had been getting eaten the whole time. Exhibit 4. The signature. Dad made me hold the folder Dexter had left behind at the nurse's station in his retreat. Drafts, mostly, he'd said, and he was right. A draft restated trust from last spring, naming Dexter's successor trustee, with a signature line already inked. Already inked. And here's the thing about Amos Reed's signature that no forger could know from bank paper. In 1987, my father came off a roof and shattered his right shoulder. Since that year, he can't make a smooth loop. He signs in short vertical strokes, little fence posts, he calls them, a signature you could hang a gate on. The ink on that draft flowed in long, confident, unbroken loops. Whoever signed it had a healthy shoulder and no idea. My father looked at that page for a long time, not angry, inspecting. Then he tapped the loops with one finger and said quietly, "The boy forged the wrong decade of me." Exhibit 5. At 9:40 p.m., from the hallway chair outside room 612, I called Rhea Colton's emergency line. I read her the day in order. The false death call, the recording, the contact filter, ridgeline, the inked draft, the chart flagging at the nurse's station. There was a silence on the line exactly as long as a professional deciding how much of her weekend to cancel. Then Rhea said 5 sentences I will keep like tools in a box. Certified holds on every account by 9 a.m. To physician capacity letter while he's conveniently in a building full of physicians. Adult Protective Services report. Today's date, not tomorrow's. Tell Amos to sign nothing that doesn't come from my printer. And Calvin, back up that phone twice before you sleep. Numbers before shouting. Paper before rage. I backed up the phone twice, plugged it in, and slept in the recliner with it under my hand like a level. Down the hall, a man who'd been dead since 6:42 that morning snored like a table saw. Best sound I ever heard. The next afternoon, Dexter requested a family meeting. His words: he booked the little conference room off the hospital's family pavilion, 6 chairs, a fake plant, a box of institutional tissues, and he arrived wearing a blazer and carrying 2 folders now, which in Dexter terms meant he had escalated to maximum firepower. They brought a lawyer. Sort of. A voice on speakerphone, a man named Krebs, from one of those offices where the address on the website is a strip mall and the photo is a stock image of the scales of justice. Krebs opened by saying the family's only concern was Mr. Reed's well-being, and then spent 11 uninterrupted minutes on asset consolidation. Here was their new offer dressed in wellness language. AIM assigns a durable power of attorney to Brielle. Just to modernize things. The properties get moved into a family entity for protection from scammers. Dexter said scammers friends and did not laugh. The discipline of the man, and in exchange, nobody pursues the unfortunate misunderstanding of the death call. That last part was delivered gently. As a favor, my daughter looked at her grandfather, alive, in a robe now instead of a gown, brass tape clipped to the belt, and offered to forgive him for the morning she buried him over the phone. And Rhea Colton had told us exactly what to do in this room. Nothing. They're panicking, she'd said. Panic people escalate their paper. Every document they generate this week is another exhibit. Give them room to build the case against themselves. Buy me 7 days. So I performed. I want to be honest with you about that, because this channel is honest or it's nothing. I played the tired, cornered old man they had already decided I was. I rubbed my face. I let my voice waver. I said, maybe you're right about the house, and I watched Dexter's shoulders come down off his ears. I said we'd need a little time to review. 7 days, no filings, nobody signs anything, no contest on both sides, and Krebs, smelling a closing, agreed so fast the speakerphone clipped. 7 days. Rhea got her 7 days. And Dexter got the memory of my waiver, which he trusted the way he trusted every weakness he ever smelled on a man. Both of us left happy. Only one of us was right. Through all of it, my father sat in the wheelchair by the window with a blanket over his lap, eyes shut, doing an impression of a napping elder so convincing that Brielle actually lowered her voice to say, honestly, this is why the memory care conversation isn't optional. He let the meeting end. He let them gather their folders. He waited until Dexter leaned down close on the way out, close enough for Cologne, to pat him on the shoulder and murmur, "Good talk, Grandpa." One eye opened. Just one. And the gravel whisper said, "Measure twice, son. You've only measured once." Dexter smiled the way men smile at old-timer nonsense, and left. He had no idea he'd just been read the whole 4th act. People imagine revenge as shouting. Fire, slam doors, a speech. Friends, I inspected infrastructure for 40 years. Let me tell you what actually brings a structure down. Load applied steadily at the exact points already cracked. No speeches, just physics with paperwork. Here is how 7 days of physics landed on Brielle and Dexter Holt. In order. Monday, 9 a.m. Rhea's certified holds hit every account with my father's name on it. Quiet as snowfall. Nobody tells the family. The money simply stops answering. Monday, 11:15 a.m. 2 physicians, Dad's cardiologist and the hospital's geriatric psychiatrist, sat with Amos Reed for 90 minutes. He recited his account numbers from memory, corrected the psychiatrist's date math once, and finished by asking whether the hospital knew its 6th-floor visitor lounge had a ceiling crack running east to west because his son could recommend somebody. The capacity letter that came out of that room described him, in clinical language, as fully oriented, with intact executive function. Rhea called it the letter that welds the vault shut. No incapacity claim. No memory care. No signatures by proxy. Ever. While they were at it, the patient advocacy office, armed with our complaint, corrected the contact file and opened an internal review into how a stable and resting call becomes a death in 38 minutes. Monday, 2 p.m. The Adult Protective Services report was filed. Financial exploitation of an elder. Attached. 19 months of Ridgeline property care invoices, the Secretary of State registration with Dexter's name on it, And because the universe loves a tidy file, the voice memo of Dexter at the nurse's station asking about a valuables inventory for a living man's rings. Tuesday, the bank's fraud department, reviewing the frozen accounts at Ria's request, found the part even I had missed. At 9:20 on the morning of the death call, 2.5 hours after Brielle told me I got nothing, someone had initiated an $18,000 transfer out of Dad's main account. Memo line is state administration. It hadn't cleared. Transfers that size take a day. It died inside the freeze, in full view of the fraud desk, with Dexter's login fingerprints all over it. He hadn't even waited for a death certificate, friends. He'd started the estate before the body, and there was no body. Wednesday, the 7-day truce Krebs had agreed to? They broke it themselves. Of course they did. Panicked people escalate their paper. Krebs filed the 2012 will with the county clerk as the operative instrument, along with a petition raising questions of capacity and undue influence by the son, which meant a revoked will, with a signature full of smooth, healthy loops that Amos Reed's shattered shoulder hasn't produced since 1987, was now a court record. Ria read the filing twice, put it down, and said the sentence I'd waited 9 days to hear somebody say out loud. That's not a family dispute anymore, Calvin. That's forgery of a testamentary instrument. They just handed the district attorney their own exhibit, notarized. Thursday was the hallway. There's always a hallway. Dexter found me alone by the 6th floor vending machines. No blazer now, no folders sweat through the collar, the cologne finally losing to the building. And he made me the offer men like him always make when the physics arrive. Drop it. Family peace. Unfreeze the accounts, pull the APS thing, and we all go back to Sunday dinners. Brielle's your daughter, Calvin. You want to be the man who put your own daughter in a courtroom? Everything can go back to normal. I looked at him for a long moment, and I gave him the only line I'd prepared all week. Normal was you eating an old man's accounts while he carried your Christmas cards on his refrigerator. Normal is closed. The county has the paperwork. And then Friday. Friday was Brielle. She came alone to room 612, no black outfit this time, no performance I could detect. And with the door open and the memo running, my daughter finally said the true thing, the sentence underneath the whole story. She didn't beg. She didn't apologize. She looked at her grandfather, discharged papers on the tray, dressed in his own clothes, brass tape on his belt. And she said, "You were sitting on all of it. For houses. For what? I waited my whole life for this family to hand me what I..." And she caught it half a second too late, the way you catch a glass already off the table. He owed me. After everything. He owed me. After everything. I still don't know what everything was. Being raised? Being loved on schedule? My father looked at her. And this is the only moment in 9 days I saw his face actually move, and he said, "Gravel quiet. I built 10 houses in my life, child. I was never going to leave you a dime less than the daughters who visit. You didn't lose an inheritance this week. You spent it. At 6:42 in the morning, on a phone call." She left. The door didn't slam. Somehow that was worse. The tally, when the dust settled. APS finding of financial exploitation. $61,400 in restitution to be repaid, secured by a judgment. A criminal referral on the forged will and the $18,000 transfer. The DA, I'm told, was particularly moved by the phrase estate administration on a living man's money. Dexter's fund finally became famous, just not the way he'd practiced saying it at parties. And the club membership, the leased German cars, the cardstock Christmas cards, all of it went the way unfunded structures go. Not with a bang, with a notice of default. My father signed his own discharge papers that Friday afternoon. Fence post strokes, a signature you could hang a gate on. And as the orderly wheeled him past the nurse's station, he stopped, gave Nurse Adora the brass measuring tape's little salute, and delivered the exit line I promised you 40 minutes ago. Tell the children they inherited a fantasy. I'm still signing my own paperwork. So here's where everybody ends up. No reunions. No redemption montage. Just consequences, filed in order, the way I file everything. Dexter. The criminal case is grinding forward the way those cases do, slowly, expensively, publicly. Ridgeline Property Care, LLC, was administratively dissolved. Its only client had been an old man who trusted his granddaughter's husband. Between the restitution judgment and the legal bills, the Holt's visible prosperity turned out to be exactly what my father's houses never were. Staged. Last I heard, Dexter was consulting. For whom, on what, no one can say. The fund remains invisible to the naked eye. Brielle, my daughter, avoided charges. The DA's office concluded the forgery and the transfer were Dexter's hands. But not indicted is a low bar to build a life on. She's working now, a real job, salaried at a title company of all places. The woman finally reads deeds for a living. The judgment garnishes what it garnishes. We speak twice a year by phone on birthdays, short calls, careful as icy steps. My father set one condition for the door ever reopening. And it isn't money, because with Amos Reed it was never money. Come with a chair, not a calculator. Sit with me one afternoon wanting nothing. I'll know. For years of afternoons and counting. The chair's still empty. That's her ledger to balance, not mine. The houses. This is the part I'm proudest of, so let me take my time. The 4 rental houses and the land east of Charlotte went into the trust exactly as Rhea had built it, with one amendment my father dictated from his own kitchen table, in block capitals, while I made the coffee. When he goes, decades from now, at a time of his own choosing, the whole portfolio funds the Amos Reed First Nail Scholarship, tools, tuition, and first-year wages support for young people going into the building trades. Kids like the one the banks wouldn't lend a nail to in 1958. The paperwork calls it a legacy endowment. Dad calls it hiring my replacements. Me. I still live in the first house, the one he built by hand. I still drive him to appointments. I still sort the pills into the Sunday through Saturday box. Twice a week we sit on his porch with coffee gone lukewarm, and the brass measuring tape sits on the little table between us like a third chair, and we talk about nothing. Lumber prices, the game, the ceiling crack in the hospital lounge. He's still mad nobody's fixed. 19 months of caregiving turned out to be the best investment in the family. Not because of the will, because of the toast. I was 3 feet away when it mattered. That's the whole inheritance, friends. Proximity. Everything else is paperwork. And the visitor badge from that afternoon, 3:12 p.m., time-stamped, is framed in my father's hallway, next to 60 years of building permits. He walks visitors past it without comment. If they ask, he says only, first time the children ever signed in. Because here's the moral, and then I'll let you go. A last name is not a deed. A hospital hallway is not an estate sale. And a living man's money is not yours now. Not at 6:42 in the morning. Not ever. Not while he can still walk his own hallway in Grippy socks and answer his own door. Family isn't who shows up for the reading of the will. Family is who shows up with a chair, not a calculator, while the monitors are still beeping. They declared him dead at dawn to get rich by Thursday. He walked into his own eulogy by mid-afternoon. And every morning since, at his own kitchen table, in a house he built with his own hands, my father eats his toast slowly, because at 91 he says the one thing he refuses to do for anybody is hurry. So now you've heard the whole file. Tell me in the comments one word and be honest, because your answer says something about what's been done to you. Bedside, would you have ended it face-to-face in that hallway, the day of like we did? Or court? Would you have stayed silent, let them file their forged paper, and buried them with exhibits? If this story held you for 50 minutes, the like button is right there, and subscribe for next week's story. It involves a retirement party, a company the family didn't know existed, and a son-in-law who gave a toast to the wrong man. Until then, keep your name on your own paperwork, and keep a chair by the bed for the ones who actually sit in it.